Welcome to the Practice Squad Podcast, episode 15. It has been long awaited. It's been a few months. I'm here with Chris. Today we're going to talk about the NBA teams that are going to Disney World. Now I'll just give off a few important dates first. So July 30th is once the teams start playing again. August 15th and 16th are going to be the play-ins. So if there's a tie, then those teams will go at it for those 2 days. And then August 17th, that's where you have to mark your calendar. That's when the NBA playoffs are going to start. So here are the teams that are going to make the travel to Disney World. We're going to look at the teams who have not clinched yet in the West and the East. That visual is playing right now. We have the Dallas Mavericks, the Memphis Grizzlies, the Portland Trail Blazers, New Orleans Pelicans, Sacramento Kings, San Antonio Spurs, Phoenix Suns. And then in the East, we have the Brooklyn Nets, the Orlando Magic, and somehow the Washington Wizards. Now, Chris, we're going to start in the West first. We're going to look at the 26 and 39 Phoenix Suns. Do they have any shot? And if they do, what are their strengths?
I mean, they're significant games out. You said that there's 8 games for a playoff appearance, and they're 6 games back, 5.5, 6 games back from the team ahead of them, which is Memphis, so they do have a legitimate shot. But aside from DeAndre Ayton and Devin Booker, there really isn't a lot of talent on that team. They're still in the rebuild phase, but they do have a lot of promise. So I think it's a really far stretch for them to make the playoffs over teams like the Blazers and the Pelicans.
Yeah, and just to hop on that for a minute, I mean, the Suns don't really excel at anything. I'm really shocked that their record is that, because they missed DeAndre Ayton for quite a bit of a year. But yeah, they're still a few big pieces away from actually, contending. And DeAndre Ayton's great. He's a defensive powerhouse. Devin Booker can score, just a few more pieces away. Now moving on to the number 12 San Antonio Spurs. There's some bad news here about missing LaMarcus Aldridge. And the Spurs, they're not too bad scoring-wise. They were 10th in the league at 113.2 points per game. The issue is for missing LaMarcus Aldridge now. So, I mean, it's going to be a long shot. I don't think DeMar DeRozan can really be a number one guy on a championship team. You saw that in Toronto. I really think there's just lost hope. We'll see what happens. Chris, do you have anything to add on to that?
No, a lot of their offense has to run through LaMarcus Aldridge's mid-range game, and they're going to have to sacrifice that. I mean, DeRozan and LA are both really good mid-range shooters, but DeMar doesn't shoot a lot of three-pointers, and the spacing around him isn't all that great either.
And don't get me wrong, coaching matters a ton here, but there's no way Greg Popovich can coach this team to make a possible run in the playoffs. I don't even think they have a shot at getting the 8th seed.
No, I don't either. I feel like the Suns are more qualified to get that position than the Spurs.
Exactly. So there's 4 teams now in the West, because we're just assuming the Mavericks can win a game. I think that's pretty safe to say.
Yeah.
So now here's another visual on the screen of these 4 teams and their opponents. Now it stands out to me as they all play each other a ton. We'll start with the 11th seed, the 28 and 36 Sacramento Kings. They're also tied with the New Orleans Pelicans. Chris, tell me the weaknesses of the Kings.
The Kings are definitely their health. De'Aaron Fox has been battling ankle injuries the whole season, and he's never been really on the court that much. Luke Walton, I still don't have confidence in him. He was fired from LA last year, and he hasn't shown any signs of being a good coach, even in Sacramento, where the team is supposed to be better than what he had in LA. And it just seems like that team has been battling injuries all year, and they get bit in the butt again by De'Aaron Fox getting a sprained ankle. I don't see them really making a run at all, even making the playoffs as a stretch, so I don't think they'll make it.
Yeah, and they rely so much on having a really good transition game and being kind of a fast-paced team. It looks like they kind of took a step back from it this year. Marvin Bagley has never been healthy. I mean, and you need a guy like him to rely on. I'm surprised the Kings are in this position. I thought they were going to be a lot better at the beginning of this year, and I'm actually surprised that they're this decent. I mean, being 8 games below 500 isn't decent. It's pretty bad, but I'm surprised that they're still managing. Looking at the Pelicans, now this is a really interesting case. They're actually tied for 4th in the league for points per game, 116.2, thanks to Brandon Ingram. But they missed Zion for most of this year, and they're look at that. I mean, they're scoring great. I don't know how they're doing it. I mean, they are a team to watch for sure. What is one big strength that you think the Pelicans have heading into this?
The Pelicans only had a handful of games with Zion, and in those games he averaged about 24 points, and he was dominant in every single phase of the game. And having him and combining him with Brandon Ingram and Lonzo being able to pass the ball and JJ Redick being able to shoot the ball, they can attack at you at every single angle. Zion can slash. Lonzo can find anybody on the court and get them open even when they're not. They just look like a really promising team that can make I think that they have the best shot in the West to make the 8th seed out of any of the teams. I like their depth. I think Jackson Hayes is an excellent shot blocker. I think that they'll make it interesting.
I mean, they're probably not going to get by the Lakers or Clippers. Maybe they might steal a game or two. Mm-hmm. Maybe one. I think what's going to hurt them is their experience. And also, I like the pieces they have in place. They just need to develop more in order to contend.
Yeah.
So now looking at the number 9 Portland Trailblazers, Dame got hurt and they kind of fell down a lot. I mean, Dame's going to be healthy. I'm assuming Nurkic is coming back. Do they have a shot? They're 29-37.
They do, specifically because of Dame's ability to take over a game. McCollum will have to be playing really, really well because the bench isn't good. They'll be missing Rodney Hood, who was really important last year in their playoff run. He tore his Achilles this year. So a lot of it's going to have to go off of McCollum and Lillard. I mean, Hassan Whiteside averaged 16 points per game this year, and he was one of the top leaders in rebounds too, and blocks, of course. And Hassan's had a career year, but those three, I don't think that they can lead them deep into the playoffs. So, they might make the 8th seed. If they do, they'll be in first round exit, just like when they played the Warriors.
Wow, yeah. I mean, Carter's not here right now, but I'll make sure to say this because he believes this as well. I agree with it. Maurice Harkless and Al-Farouq Amino leaving really screwed their defense over. That's going to be their weakness. Whiteside's great. Nurkic is pretty good at defense. They are still an awful defensive team. They're not going to go far. And then we go to the 8th seed with 32-33 Memphis Grizzlies. Ja Morant, Brandon Clark, Jaren Jackson Jr., all those guys shocked the world this year. I mean, who knew the Grizzlies would have a rebuild that's going this fast?
Yeah. The thing that's going to hold them back is just that they're so young. They're all rookies or second-year players. So having that and putting them into a playoff spot for the first time in a couple of years, I don't see them thriving, but in a few years, this team can be one of the best in the league. And potentially, you could see some super team ideas starting to boil up from the amount of talent they have.
I agree. So out of those teams that we just mentioned, who do you think has the best shot of being the 8th seed?
For me, it's the Pelicans.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with that too. I mean, looking at their schedule, I mean, there's a few tough games. They have to play the Kings twice. They have to play Memphis once. They have to play the Jazz, Clippers, but I mean, they still have a fairly easy schedule. So now we can move into the teams that are, I mean, the seeding is still thrown up in the air right now. We're going to look at the Dallas Mavericks first. They are such a good offensive team. Luka Doncic has developed into, in my opinion, a top 3 player in this league already. Kristaps Porzingis is great. They have a solid supporting cast. Once again, I think the two things that kill them here are experience and defense.
I completely agree. Luka didn't have any playoff experience last year. Kristaps has been playing in New York, so he doesn't even have a taste of what it feels like to be near the 8th seed. So the experience is going to be something different that they haven't had before. They're young, but they can shoot pretty well. They have a really good supporting cast. If they make the playoffs, they could be sleepers like the Celtics were a couple years ago. I think that's a fair comparison, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, I think if they get the Nuggets, I think they're going to have a solid chance of actually maybe even winning that series. Against the Clippers, I could see it going to 6, but, I mean, there's experience on their hand and playoff Kawhi Leonard.
Yeah.
So now moving on to the 6th seed, the Houston Rockets. Their tallest player on the roster is 6'7", I believe.
6'7".
And that's not even their center, is it?
And that's Robert Covington.
Yeah, so PJ Tucker is the starting center. I'm going to voice my opinion very loud here. You cannot have a center that's below 6'7" and win an NBA championship. It's just a joke. trading away. I mean, it worked a little bit in the regular season. Once we got in between, like near the COVID that shut down the entire league, the Rockets were actually on a pretty bad run. It just shows that you can't win in the league with a really, really short center. Chris, you have anything to add on to that?
Once they play a team that's like the Nuggets, where they have a really good rebounder, just someone that's 7 feet tall, or the Lakers, or even the Blazers, where they have Hassan Whiteside, who's just grabbing insane boards, they'll have no shot because they'll get killed on the offensive glass, and offensive points will just be skyrocketed. Points in the paint will be insane. So it's an experiment that didn't have a lot of time to show itself, but from what I've seen, it doesn't work at all.
Yeah, and then the upside for that's obviously they have Russell Westbrook and James Harden, who have worked pretty well together this year.
Playoff Harden is a different type of Harden.
Yeah, that's fair. They're going to live by the three and die by the three, and this year they're also going to die by the rebounds, especially if they play a team, like you said, who has a decent big. So moving on to the number 5 seed. This is so shocking. Oklahoma City Thunder. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was amazing. Chris Paul didn't look to lose a step at all. Steven Adams is an amazing rebounder. It's really shocking that they're here. Do you think they're going to make any noise in the playoffs whatsoever, though?
I don't think they'll make noise, but I think this is a really promising sign. Shai looks to be like potentially one of the best guards in the league for the future. Chris Paul's a really good distributor. Steven Adams is just a dog on the glass. Schroeder has been a really good six man of the year candidate.
Potentially, yeah.
I think that they won't make a deep run, but I think it's promising considering that with losing Paul George and Russell Westbrook, they're still a playoff team, and they have a ton of first-round picks. I think it's a good sign for OKC.
Yeah, I could see them packaging that for someone, potentially, or they can just sit on those picks and get some really good young talent, probably.
Yeah.
Billy Donovan's done a phenomenal job of turning this team, not even turning this team around. The Thunder were pretty good last year, and he's continued that success even with losing Russell Westbrook and Paul George. One thing that is concerning, even though Chris Paul's an amazing playmaker, OKC is averaging almost 16 turnovers a game. That's not great. So that's something to look at when they may face off against the Utah Jazz, who can get steals. Yeah, I don't see them making a deep run. It's amazing that they made it this far. Now let's head to the Utah Jazz, the team that kind of started it all. I mean, it was inevitable anyways. The virus was going to get an NBA player some way or somehow. It started with Rudy Gobert. Is the chemistry there? I don't think that it's that bad. I mean, Mitchell and Gobert have said both that they're getting over it. They're ready to win a championship. Chris, what's the weakness of the Utah Jazz?
You could always say chemistry, but I don't like anybody else on the team to be like a significant. Donovan Mitchell hucks up a ton of shots, like especially in the playoffs last year. He was just shooting like crazy. So I think the people around Donovan Mitchell have to play really, really well. Bogdan Bogdanovic. Bojan.
My bad.
He averaged 20 points per game this year, which was surprising. Joe Ingles is a pretty good defender, but I think someone has to take some shots from Donovan if they want to win.
Another interesting thing is that Bogdanovic is out for a year with hand surgery.
Oh.
So that really, I think he's the guy who kind of tied it all together. His defense is not good at all.
No.
And the other thing is, which Mike Conley are we going to see? Are we going to see the one that got paid $31 million and is well deserving of it, or are we going to see a bottom tier point guard?
I don't think we'll ever see that tier Mike Conley ever again. I think that he's too old for that now. I think that's gone.
Yeah. So I mean, Rudy Gobert, phenomenal shot blocker. There's just at the 3 and the 4 positions, there's just too much worry, and like you said, Donovan Mitchell's shooting. So now we're going on to the number 3 Denver Nuggets. They didn't really... I thought they were going to be the 1 seed again. They kind of took a step back, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. I've never been a huge fan of Jokic. I've never really saw him as an elite player in the league. But I thought that they would have potentially been the 2 seed because it seems like the last couple of years they've been really, really good. I thought Michael Porter Jr. was going to play really well this year, but he's been injured all year. So we'll have to see with that team.
Yeah, they're an interesting team. I think to have a guy like Nikola Jokic who can put up 20 points and 7 assists and get rebounds, I think that's very valuable. Again, I think they're one big piece away from making it. And it might be Michael Porter Jr. developing, but that's obviously not going to happen this year. I mean, they're well coached. I like Mike Malone. I really like their team a lot. They're just so deep. But I think they're still one piece away from really having a chance at winning that NBA championship.
Interesting thing is that they're putting Bol at the small forward for the scrimmages in Orlando right now.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I wonder if they're actually gonna run that.
This 7'3" shooting Bol running the small forward. That's like a 2K cheat code.
Houston could really use him right now at center.
Yeah, they could use anybody taller than 6'7".
So now we're moving on to the two teams who really have a good shot of winning it, and we're going to the number 2 Los Angeles Clippers. Chris, is there any one glaring weakness of this team?
I think you could say Montrezl Harrell leaving the bubble for a family issue. He's been a big player for them, but top to bottom, they're a really solid team. They have a really good bench. Lou Williams is a sixth man of the year candidate again, which he is pretty much every single year. And then Kawhi and Paul George are one of the best duos in the NBA. So there isn't like a beaming weakness. It's just going to have to come down how they play in the playoffs.
See, and I think their weakness is playoff Paul George.
Yeah.
Kawhi Leonard can obviously get it done. They're probably going to get more scoring, so Paul George doesn't have to play as... I mean, he kind of didn't play great this year, but he doesn't have to play that superstar Paul George to get things done. If they play against the Lakers, though, he's going to need to take that next step. And that is going to be the next team we talk about. Your favorite team, the Los Angeles Lakers. I mean, they have LeBron James and Anthony Davis, 2 top 5 players in the NBA.
Yeah.
They have so many strengths. They're great at everything. LeBron can run point guard. LeBron can run anything, basically. Anthony Davis is maybe the best defensive player in the league. I mean, I think I'd put him behind Rudy Gobert for sure, but I think Anthony Davis is probably second.
Yeah.
Weakness-wise, I mean, I'm going to say... part of this, I'm going to say that Rajon Rondo is, I don't think he's out for the entire time in Orlando.
6 weeks.
So he's going to be out for quite a bit. So that's going to hurt them. And then Avery Bradley also not going to play. So, I mean, this team looks a little less deep, but does it really matter if they have LeBron and AD?
I don't think it makes too big of a difference, but having 2 of the really good defensive perimeter defenders in Avery Bradley and Rondo is going to hurt a little bit, but I think someone like Alex Caruso or Quinn Cook, who doesn't play that great a defense, but he can shoot the ball pretty well, I think that they'll step in and do fine.
Right, yeah. So that concludes the Western Conference. There's a lot of interesting pieces there. Now, to move over and shift to the less interesting piece is the Eastern Conference. So there are 3 teams that have not clinched the playoffs. That is the 7th seed, the 8th seed, and the 9th seed. That's kind of just boring. The Wizards are 6 games behind the Orlando Magic for 8th place. I can't believe I'm asking this. Do you think the Wizards can get it done?
They have no Bradley Beal, no shot.
And no John Wall.
No John Wall. They haven't even seen him in a couple of years. There's no way.
And you have Thomas Bryant?
Thomas Bryant, yes. He was cut from the Lakers a couple of years ago.
And they're also a horrible rebounding team. 41.7 rebounds per game. That is awful. I mean, they just don't have a shot. They're screwed.
They're in the same position that the Nets are.
Exactly, and we're going to get to them in a second. First, we have to go to the team that has 1 less loss than them. That's the Orlando Magic. Now, let me pull out my papers really quick, but the Orlando Magic are kind of bad. They're one of the worst offensive teams. We're ranked 27th in that category. They shoot 44.2% per game. That's near the bottom as well. They're 34% from 3. That's not phenomenal. And then they have... The good thing that's going from is 5.7 blocks per game. Jonathan Isaac is a really good defensive player. I feel like he should be talked about more.
Yeah, he's one of the more underrated defenders in the league. I think people saw him coming out of draft, and because they haven't heard his name being so loud, people are saying bust. But he's a really good defender. He's one of the best in the league. But for their weakness, I wrote down everything, because I think besides Vuvacek, I don't think that they're good at anything. I can't believe how they get the 8 seed every single year now just to get smacked. I don't know what it is about Orlando, but there's something going on.
Yeah, the Magic are in a limbo between contention and, well, rebuilding. I mean, they're not getting a good enough pick because they're barely making the playoffs every year. Even if they missed, they wouldn't get a great pick. So there needs to be a point in time where they need to make the decision of what are we going to do? Are we going to trade away Nikola Vucevic and Aaron Gordon and just start over, or what are we going to do? Because the Magic are just in a really tough spot. They'll be a fine opponent to get swept by against the Milwaukee Bucks.
Absolutely.
And now we talk about the number 7 seed. So the Magic may not even have to play the Milwaukee Bucks. They'll get a nice series against the Raptors. But Brooklyn Nets, Chris, take this one away.
Okay, the Nets have no Spencer Dinwiddie, no Kyrie Irving, no Kevin Durant, which seemed like a really good team. They signed a 40-year-old Jamal Crawford. And so their team is just going to be looking like Jared Allen, Jamal Crawford, and Karis LeVert. That's going to be the team that's going to be leading the show. Oh, and Joe Harris. Other than that, it's just a mystery team of players that you've never heard of.
Yeah, I mean, some of them might take advantage of this, like Nick Claxton. I mean, he'll get more playing time. There's a few other guys on the Nets that will get to show what they're made of before they probably get traded for another star. Yeah, the Nets have no hope. They are not going to win many games. Now we'll move on to the teams, and this is 1 through 6, I think, are the teams that have a shot of making the finals. Number 6, the Philadelphia 76ers. Ben Simmons is playing power forward. I feel like they still need to run the ball through him sometimes.
Yeah, they're playing him at small forward this year and not in the playoffs and not point guard, which is interesting. But I think Ben Simmons, I know he's a defensive player and he also likes to rim rush a lot, but if he starts to make some threes, he'll be a really dangerous player. It's a miracle that they're this low in the seeding at the 6th spot because of how talented the roster is with Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. I think they were terrible away this year, but since they're playing at a neutral site this year, maybe they'll have a little bit more of a shot, but it all depends on players like Ben Simmons.
Yeah, and Josh Richardson at point guard I think might help a lot too because, I mean, he can carry the ball down the court more. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, this team is super talented. I just don't understand. Something's not clicking. Brett Brown's an awful coach, by the way. I had to throw that in there. Moving on to the 5th seed, the Indiana Pacers. Speaking of not a bad coach is Nate McMillan. He somehow guided this team to pretty much the same spot they were in last year without Victor Oladipo. Domantas Sabonis looks great. The problem is the Pacers don't really excel at anything. They just play a really gritty, good team-based style of offense and defense.
Yeah. Sabonis is a really underrated player. I liked him when he came out of Gonzaga. I thought he was going to be good when he was on OKC. But a lot of this depends on how well Victor Oladipo is. Because if Victor Oladipo is, you're talking about an all-star duo between Sabonis and Oladipo. But if we saw the Oladipo that we saw ending the year this season, averaging 13 points and not shooting the ball well, this team should be a first-round exit.
Yeah, Victor Oladipo, it'll be interesting to see if he shakes off the rust, if he comes back. We're going to go to the 4th seed now. This is kind of a polarizing team, the Miami Heat, a team full of underdogs. They're not terrible at really anything, but with a team led by Jimmy Butler, do you think they have a shot? Can they pull off a Raptors run? Because Jimmy Butler is no Kawhi Leonard.
No, they're too young. They have so many youth pieces. Kendrick Nunn, Tyler Hero, Bam Adebayo is making his first appearance. Duncan Robinson, who's been a really underrated player this year, he's in his rookie year. They're just so young, and Jimmy Butler is not a very supporting person when it comes to leadership. I don't know if they can handle it.
I think a Heat Pacers or Heat Sixers series would be great.
Yeah.
We're going to move on to the Boston Celtics. They're at number 3. You'd think they'd have depth. They don't have depth. And Jason Tatum, he's a decent defender, but you can't have Daniel Tice playing, big minutes, trying to guard the elite big men of the Eastern Conference. And also Kemba Walker does not have a lot of playoff experience. He's battling an injury right now. Do the Celtics have a shot?
I think that they'll make it to either the divisional part of it or the conference finals. That Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, Marcus Smart, they're all so good. Marcus Smart is an excellent defender. They're really young. They're really talented. this isn't it yet, but we said that when they made the conference finals 2 years ago. They almost shocked everyone and beat LeBron in Game 7.
Yeah, that was a very, very fun game to watch. I don't really think the Celtics have a shot. I think it's gonna come down to 1 and 2, kind of like the West. The Toronto Raptors. I mean, I'm gonna try not to show my bias here, but they're a great, great, great defensive team. They get a ton of steals. They don't allow a lot of points. I mean, and they're not horrible offensively. I mean, the Raptors are just such a great team. Pascal Siakam has emerged as, I would almost call a superstar. I don't think he's going to bring the same presence that Kawhi Leonard did, but he can bring it really close. Fred VanVleet is amazing. They have amazing bench players. They have decent guys that, I mean, split minutes sometimes with Norman Powell, OG Anunoby, Terrence Davis. And they also have bigs with Serge Ibaka and Marc Gasol that aren't talked about a lot, but they're really great players. Do you think they could possibly make it to the finals?
I think that they have a really good shot. I think that they have one of the best shots in the East. But it all comes down to who's going to take Kawhi's spot, who's going to fill in that leadership spot and carry the team make the game-winning shots. Who's going to be that? Is it going to be Pascal? Is it going to be someone else that just emerges like Fred VanVleet did last year? I think that's what it comes down to.
And Kyle Lowry is actually a pretty clutch shooter. I mean, he gets hated on a lot for choking in the playoffs. He actually, honestly, doesn't do that bad. I mean, obviously, he has a horrible game, so he's not this premier playoff performer. But Kyle, he's a great two-way player.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now we're moving on to the last team we're going to talk about, the Milwaukee Bucks. Giannis Antetokounmpo, if he doesn't show up in the playoffs like he did last year against the Raptors, it's over.
Yeah, the whole team has to run through him. Like, he's the best player. He's one of the best players in the league. Top 2, you can interchange him and LeBron. He's an MVP candidate. If he doesn't perform well, it's just going to be question marks around his head.
Yeah, and do you see these papers right here? Bucks are leading almost anything. Doesn't matter if Giannis isn't going to play well in the postseason. They have a pretty solid team. They have a bunch of shooters, but yeah, like I said, first, they have no chance if Giannis doesn't show up. If he does, then I could see the Bucks in the finals.
The whole reason why the Bucks do well is because teams are too busy about trying to combat him, and they leave somebody else open.
Exactly. I mean, and Giannis still scores a ton. Giannis is not a great shooter, though.
No.
There have been a lot of people lately debating me about he's a great three-point shooter. No, he is not. So with that, we are concluding episode 15 of a Practice Squad podcast. Hope you all enjoyed. We'll be back soon. See you possibly this week.